All right, so let me just bring up my chat box in case somebody tries to send me a message. All right, so I think when last we left, everybody should have been up to here, sort of putting their components in and baking them in, right, into Rhino. So you don't necessarily have to run Grasshopper anymore, all right? Now, I'm not naive. I mean, how many of you are actually at this point and how many of you still need to bake things in? For instance, this is where you might need to get on the microphone or simply type something in the chat. I mean, the idea is that we finish this, by the time we end today, we're 95% done. I'm all caught up, Kayla is. Okay, so you're right here with me? Who else? Anybody need to go back into Grasshopper and rebake some stuff, or need me to show you that? I'm right with you. Okay, so let's go ahead through this. And then if I need to take a step backwards, maybe towards the end, as people are working, we can do that. So there are some things to do today. One of the things I was looking at was, instead of doing the make 2D, we'll look at how we can render things with some curves on and off and edges on and off, in order to avoid the cluster that is taking thousands of things and trying to solve all of their make 2D stuff with. So that becomes a royal pain in the rear, to put it nicely. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the workflow really quickly, and then I'll let you guys follow along, and let's sort of do this. So I'm just going to go to my perspective view. I've already turned it to parallel view instead of perspective. So I've already gone to isometric, and I picked northeast, northwest, southeast, or southwest. Can't remember which one this is. Apparently it's south. No, I guess not. Maybe it was northeast. That does not look correct either. Okay, but going around and just choosing, maybe this one is one I had. It looks nicer. But again, just sort of picking the viewpoint, the one that you like the best, right? I have my ground plane on. I have the blocks on, you know, the street blocks on. So these do look very much like, hopefully, these sort of clusters of cells, sort of stack towers, so to say, right? Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn this to rendered viewport mode, right? Turn my viewport mode, my display mode to rendered. All right, there it is. Okay, so as you can see, we could actually just export this screen capture out and get our sort of underlay for that we would put underneath the make 2D, right? So the problem with this is that there's so much stuff here that the make 2D is, there's two problems with doing a make 2D with this for the whole thing. A, it would take forever, right? Like it's really slow command. And this amount of information, it would just take forever. Like it would literally take a long time. I would be sitting here with you guys, just sort of like humming and twiddling my thumbs forever, feels like, right? And the other thing is that even after waiting all that time for it to do the make 2D, there'd still be a bunch of goofy mistakes in it that we'd have to clean up, okay? So let's try to figure out a way to streamline this. And I think I've done that, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, I'm just going to, you know, turn off rendered. I'm going to go back to something that's a little less heavy to show like shaded or ghosted. Probably ghosted. I like ghosted for whatever reason. Okay. And we're going to do several things, but one is we're going to generate lines, right, at each of these edges for our poly surfaces, right? And then what we're going to do is when we'll go back to the rendered mode, the display mode, what we'll do is we'll change the render display mode settings to actually show lines and curves and edges and things like that. So, so I'm in ghosted mode right now, display mode, and I'm just going to type in the command dupe for duplicate and then edge. So dupe edge, right? What this will do is it'll take all the edges of all these poly surfaces that I select, and it will create curves at all of those edges for me, like lines in this case. All right. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to select edges to duplicate. And I'm just going to drag from left to right, select everything in my model that I want to make an edge of, including the street and the edges here, right? The ground. And I'm just going to hit return. All right. It might take a minute or two, but it's going to take each of those edges and it's going to actually create curves or lines at each of those. Looks like it's just wrapping up. There we go. All right. Okay. And so one of the things I didn't do, and I should have, right, was I should have made a layer for these curves that I had created. And I should have, made that the active layer so that when I generate these curves, they're on the active layer, right? So instead of backing up and redoing this, I'm just going to say cell SEL. I'm going to say CRV, cell curves, right? So all those curves that I just created, I'm just going to select them all at once, 416,000 plus of them. And I'm just going to take this layer 05 and I will call that edge curves. Why not? Edge curves, since I can't spell apparently. I'll go to, with all these curves selected, I'll go to the properties box. And you can see, maybe you'll be able to see here in a minute, all these curve properties, right? So it's going to tell me that the layer that they're set on was the active layer, which was these city blocks and streets. And I'm just going to change that and put them on the edge curves layer. Okay. Since there's 416,000 of them, it might take a minute, but there. Oh, good. All right. All right. So, and you'll see I have some Make 2D. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these layers really quickly, as from a previous demonstration. Okay. Every so often, I'm just going to save. It's always a good thing to do. I'm just going to quickly save this. And then once I'm done saving, I'm just going to turn that layer off for the time being so that it doesn't slow down my memory and slow me down from doing other things in my file right now. Okay, so I'll tell Rhino that you can stop saving all those curves in the memory to display them. I'll just turn that layer off for the time being. All right. Okay. Now let's go to rendered display mode again. All right, there it is. Now I'm going to turn those edge curves back on just for fun. And I think what you'll see on mine is that all those edge curves are showing up in the rendered view, right? So if you look, when I turn them on, ta-da, they're right there, right? Now yours might not show up that way, right? By default, I don't think that curves show up in the rendered display mode, right? And so what I did is I had to alter some of my display mode settings in order to show and render out the lines or the curves that we just created for these edges in the display mode, right, in my viewport. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and show you guys how to do those settings. You go to Tools, pull down menu, okay, and then Options, right? So I'm going to bring up all those Rhino options, okay. And then down here where it says View, if I expand that out with that little caret, you'll see that there's a set of display modes. I can expand that out with a caret, and you'll see that I can change all the settings for the wireframe display, the shaded display, rendered display, ghosted, X-ray, technical, or whatever, right? Arctic, which is a kind of a nice one. Rendered is highlighted with this crazy blue because that's actually active one, right? So if I select that one in the settings, I can see all the settings here. And what I want you to do is just go through yours and look at mine. I'm just going to expand this box so you can see all the settings at once. And what I have is I have show ISO curves, show edges, show curves, right? All turned on. I even have show points turned on for rendered mode. Okay, so I'm checking these boxes off. For background, I'm using render settings. I'm just using render settings here, right? Yours might already be set to that. But really, what I really want to do is make sure that I'm showing ISO curves, tangent edges, tangent seams, show curves. Okay. That show curves is really important, right? Lines are curves, right? So I want to make sure that I have that checked. And when I'm done, I'm going to hit OK. All right. I'll hit OK. And okay. So is anybody going through with me in real time and this is working for you? Hopefully. All right, so I'm going to start over. If you want to follow along, if you weren't following along before, now's the time to catch up. All right. Okay, so first thing I did is I needed to generate all these edge curves, right? So what I want is a sort of a line drawing of the axon here, along with the rendered information, right? The Make 2D is just way too complicated to do. Rhino just doesn't handle it well, you know. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on we're going to generate the lines for this, for all these edges, and then we'll generate the lines for all the intersections as well. But we'll turn our settings so that the render display mode also renders out these curves and lines, right? So first thing I do is I can type in the command dupe edge, right? Duplicated edge, dupe edge, D-U-P-E-D-G-E, all one word. I can then select all of my geometry at once and hit enter. And it'll then take all those edges, all the sort of hard edges, my poly surfaces. It'll generate lines at all of those edges for me. Okay. I put those in their own layer called edge curves here. My layer is turned off. Okay. Okay. Anybody already done with that? No one's done with it. Oh, come on. I think someone's done with it. Probably. The reason we adjusted the settings after generating these, done. Okay, yes. Do you have your sun turned on? I do not have my sun turned on. I never turn my sun on unless I really want some really crisp shadows, because the sun will bleach everything out big time. I have the skylight on, I have the sun off, right? That's typical. That's my typical default here. If you need to reset to default, that's fine as well. Okay. I'm not so happy with Rhino's rendering engine, you know, in general. But for these quick, just adding tone to things, sort of underlays, you know, I think render mode actually does the job for me, right? So, I mean, if you're interested in getting like, you know, there are both a series of free and paid plugins that you can run off of Rhino or off of Revit, off of SketchUp, off of Studio Max, things like V-Ray or Maxwell, or in what's the other one? A couple of them escape my memory at the moment, but you know, there are some out there, but everybody has their own preference with those things, and I don't want to make you guys buy more software. So there are free ones out there. So anyway, once you get these lines generated, you know, again, I would go to the tools pull down options. This is where it is in Windows, right? Go to the view setting at the very bottom, right? You see all these different, this menu of different settings you can begin to tweak, right? View is at the bottom. You can expand that out with the caret. You get display modes. I can expand that out with the caret. I can get rendered. I can select rendered right here in the visibility, right? So what items show up when you're in this display mode? ISO curves and curves and things like that might not be checked. If not, then make sure they're checked and hit OK. Right? Make sure they're checked and then hit OK. Now, one other thing I've done in order to get rid of ISO curves, right? ISO parms are all those little check marks around these. I've selected all of these. and I've gone to the properties box. We just have to wait because there's a lot of surfaces and poly surfaces here. So when I select them all at once, you just got to wait a minute. I'm just going to go to the properties, right? And there is in the properties box a setting called ISO curve density. And by default, your show surface ISO curve setting is probably checked. You can uncheck that so that you don't actually want to, so that you don't actually have to show the ISO curves, right? Right. So again, I'm just selecting all the surfaces or poly surfaces at once, going to the settings, the properties settings, unchecking show surface ISO curves. What that does is it gets rid of all the sort of isoparametric curves in the middle of the surface. Okay. All right, Roger asks, changing your layer color changes the color of the curves. Yes, indeed it does. Have you ever had success with different color than black? You could change it to something like gray, you know. I would stick with monochromatic though. So thinking about, you know, some sort of value between white and black. So if I change the layer color to gray, right, I suspect all of those lines turn to a light gray. In this case, they really sort of detract. They become lighter, and I think they really kind of detract from the drawing itself. So I'm just going to turn mine back to black. Right. But that's again also a very good observation, right? My lines are black in this rendered view only because I've set this edge curve layer, right, that I've baked them into, or sorry, that I generated them. The layer that I put them on, I set that layer color to black, right? So that display color matters for the layer color. All right, so there's a lot of little things that we're tweaking here, right? We're adjusting some settings for the display mode. We're putting certain things in a layer, making sure that layer color is black. We're selecting all the surfaces and turning off the isoparms, the display of the isoparms, right? But ultimately at the end, I get something that looks like this. And when I actually capture this rendering, like capture the viewport in a very quickly, then I get all this line work with it, although it's going to be rastered, right? So you'll see that when we zoom in, okay? All right, so now there's one other thing that I will bring up here. This will take a little while. So that's why I think we'll need both today and then maybe a little bit of time the next time we meet on Wednesday to finish these things up, right? One thing you might notice as I zoom in here, right, is that I generated all these edges, right? Like all the sort of corner edges. Where everything intersects, there aren't any lines, right? That's a real sticking point for me. I really want to have, you know, an accurate line drawing here, okay? And so in order to generate those extra lines where all these things intersect, we need to run the intersection command. And before we do this, let me just show you what this looks like and how you can get around this sort of interesting conundrum of using a lot of processor and memory all at once, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and save this for now. And I'm going to make sure that my edge curve layer is set to be the active layer. That way, as I generate these intersection curves, they're just automatically in this layer for me. And this typo is really killing me. I'm just going to put the R in the right place. So it's edge curves instead of edge grooves. There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to double click on my viewport label to toggle back to 4 viewports at once. What I'm really interested in is seeing the top view. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select portions of this model at a time to run the intersect command, right? So if I select all of this all at once and try to run the intersect command, it takes, I mean, it feels like it takes like as much time as you think it would need, like squared. Like it takes just an incredible amount of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in discrete chunks that hopefully go by a little quicker. And therefore, I feel like there's a sense of accomplishment as I sort of take care of these things. And in top view, it's really easy to just sort of select things by like maybe block, right? So like if you think about this as a 9 square problem, right? 3 by 3 sort of grid, I can, with a little bit of overlap, maybe select the top left, right? go from left to right and just sort of drag and select, right? I'm just going to select what I have there. I'm going to turn off my curve layer. So I don't necessarily need to generate all the intersections from curves. There we go. Turn those off. I'll reselect here after I've turned those edge curves off. Just want to make sure that I'm not. What happens when two curves intersect? You get a point, right? Two curves intersect at a point, right? So if you think about two streets intersecting at an intersection, right? When a surface intersects another surface, you get a line or a curve, right? Depending on if they're planar or not, right? So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this again. I'll just select maybe 1/3 of this at a time. And I'm going to type in the intersect command. Intersect. You'll notice that there's several different intersection commands. Intersect self, intersect two sets. I'm just going to pick the generic intersect command. I'll hit enter, and this might take a minute or so. You'll see my spinning blue wheel cursor, right? As my computer thinks about this. All right. Intersection in progress. All right. And we're going to generate quite a few curves, unfortunately, right? Because some of these curves we'll never see in the final axon, but they'll just take a little while. It takes a little bit of TLC, you know, and some patience along with. Someone's already texting or emailing me that they're not able to make it to class today. Okay, well, I would never have even known if you hadn't emailed me. Can't be your mothers and fathers. Just have to deal with it. All right. Let's see here. And again, this looks like it's about to wrap up. I thought maybe. So just under 2,000 polysurfaces that I selected to try to find all the intersections between them. You can see that it did. In fact, it generated just shy of 10,000 new lines or curves, 9,970. All right. Once again, I did exactly what I said I wouldn't do. And that is I placed them in the city blocks, and it's the wrong layer. But I'll go ahead and generate these, and then I'll just select them all at once and then deal with them after they're generated. So I'll go ahead and do another third or so. I'm just going to type in intersect again. All right. And again, I'm just waiting around. Just waiting around. At a certain point, I might, you know, since I have this overlap here between the first set that I did the intersection with and the second set, you know, over time, I might try to get rid of any duplicate curves. There's a command to select any duplicates and just delete them away. So just to try to lighten up the file here and there where I can, right? Okay, so you'll see that I've started to accidentally select some curves that I generated before. And so where curves intersect, you'll start to see points show up, right? So not only will this give me surface intersections, it'll give me curve intersections, which occur at points, right? All right. Okay. So just doing that, I'll do cell dupe, DUP, SEL DUP, select duplicates. Come on now. There we go. It's already found some duplicates. I'll go ahead and delete those, right? Just less stuff to have in your file. It's also generated points. I'll go ahead and say SEL PT, right? To select all points in my file, SEL PT, select points, short for select points. 18,000 points I can get rid of right away. Just hit delete. Nothing more satisfying than deleting stuff away that you don't need. Maybe. I mean, I'm like that. I think find it cathartic to sort of throw things away sometimes and just clean things out. All right, I'll go ahead and select this third and just run the intersect command one more time here. All right. So again, this takes a little while, right? But what I'm doing is I'm duplicating the edges, and then I'm running the intersect command, maybe a block or so at a time, or a chunk at a time, sort of selecting things in top view so I can just, make sure I'm selecting things that actually intersect each other. And trying not to do this all at once so that it really runs my computer in the ground. In other words, I'm going to do this a little bit at a time. Hopefully it doesn't take too long here. All right. And so what I want you guys to do is to do this as well. If you haven't, if you're sort of hedging back and forth between watching my screen and trying to get your own work done, get your own work done now. Try it yourself if you haven't yet, right? Select edges, make sure you put all those new curves in their own layer. Then what we'll do is we'll run the intersection command a couple of times, right? I'll probably run it, let's see, I'm gonna select this chunk right here. Maybe I can run this much. Maybe I'm pushing it, maybe not. I'll type in intersect, try to anyway. Okay, and just let that run, right? So a lot of this is just sort of selecting things, waiting for it to update, right? If your file is too heavy, like I had a really heavy file. So what I did is I scaled it back, right? I used less points in the initial seed situation. And then I turned down the number of floors, or sort of, the timer, right? And the number slider before baking it in order to find that sweet spot between, what I'm willing to deal with, right? I want it to be as dense as possible. At the same time, I don't want it to just sort of sit here at a grind, not doing anything while I try to manipulate the geometry, just because it's so heavy, because there's so much geometry, right? So trying to find that balance, right, between something that doesn't look too light, but at the same time something that's not so dense that it's unworkable, right? So we're doing two of them at once here, right? Two blocks at once, so it might take just a little longer for me, right? But go through, and again, don't be afraid to just sort of take a little bit of, little chunks, little bites at a time. I think what you'll find then is that, you can always go through here. You can always look in the parallel view. I can start to see black lines showing up and where they aren't showing up. And that way that sort of lets me know which areas I might have missed here, right? Or which ones I need to focus on. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet to just sort of magically only select the things that would actually show up in this axon view, right? Otherwise, golly, I'd totally be there like right away, right? But so we have to generate a lot of line work for, and we're not all going to see all of this line work all at once, right? I'm going to go from right to left. I'm just going to try to select these two blocks and see if we can just sort of finish some of this stuff up quickly here. Must have started with the wrong letter on my keyboard for some reason. Enter, there we go. Sect, all right. Just let it go. Again, this is easier in person when I can sort of look over your shoulder and float around the room. And I know it's easier for you guys too. I know Rhino, you probably want screen real estate, and Zoom is trying to take up your screen real estate. Some of you might have some dual monitor situations going on. If so, I'm guessing that that's hopeful. But for what it's worth, I actually wanted this class to be in person, but they kicked it back out because I guess they didn't have a classroom large enough for it. I don't know, and still maintain social distancing. Beats me. I don't know. But anyway, hopefully a year from now we're in a different place. where we don't have to worry about social distancing. It'd be really nice, wouldn't it? All right. So just waiting for my intersections to take place, right? And at a certain point, I'll probably, again, do the select duplicates, right? I might go back through and select all points and try to delete any points that were generated, if that's the case. Spend a lot of time generating these lines. And so again, what we want to do is also make sure that we adjust our display settings to display the lines, display all of our line work and curves in the render display mode, right? So, all right, so that didn't do too bad. All right, I'm just gonna take it some time here to, let's see, cell PT, right? Cell points. 18 points, yeah, well, we can get rid of those. I always like sound effects. Just makes Monday morning just a little better. All right. Especially when you see not responding here. That's not good. All right. Maybe I'll try SEL DUP, select duplicates, cell dupe, cell dup, 19 duplicates. That's pretty minimal, but I'll go ahead and select them and delete them away anyway. I don't think 19 curves are what's breaking the camel's back here. But hey, duplicates are duplicates. We don't need them. We don't need them. Redundancies. I'm just going to quickly do the last part here on mine. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this lower 2/3 and select it all. Say intersect. All right, there we go. Intersection in progress for me. Again, this goes a lot easier if you just do a little bit at a time, right? It's going to generate a lot of line work here. So once this is done generating, I'll probably select duplicates once more. I'll double check and make sure I get rid of any points. I'll go ahead and select all the curves and put them on the correct layer so that they're all on the same layer together. And then I'll double check those settings again in case you need to look at your settings. I'm happy to do that in front of you again. Okay. Just want to give everybody some time to get through this and get some of this done. Right? As usual, I suspect some of you might be getting close to being done, and some of you aren't close to being done. And so what I'll do is I'll sort of jump forward to show you the next steps for those that want to work ahead a little bit. But then I'll go back and go through the motions for anybody that might have missed something here or there. So again, this is a good time for you to, my computer is just sort of like in the spinning blue wheel of just crunching numbers. It's a good time if you have any questions, comments, or just need any quick help to speak up. Throw a comment in the chat or just get on a microphone and shout at me. Okay. Happy to help. That's what I'm here for. It's my job. So. I understand if you don't need help, you just want me to shut up and so you can do your work too. That's fine by me. How many drawings are we doing? You're doing one axon. That's all we have time for. So. Yeah. 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 Ideally, we would do 2 axons in a perspective, but doing it remotely and being someone of my word, just trying to keep things light enough to do it in class. I'm just got to be flexible. So we'll do this 1 axon. And what's nice about this, though, is that at the end, what I'll try to do, if everybody does this correctly and you export the PNGs with the transparent background, and you overlay these things correctly and you submit the PDFs, then on my own, what I can do is not only will I have each of your submissions and give you the grade, but I can also combine these into like a larger cityscape, and it would look like freaking fantastic. And I'm happy to share that with you guys as well. The other thing I want to do, I was actually going to contact the library or some other place and see if I can get your grid shells to be displayed over the break in a place that's accessible to you to take photos of them if you still need to. but then to also let the whole school see them. If that falls through between now and Wednesday, then on Wednesday, I'll let you know how you can pick them up from my office. I can set them outside for you guys to pick them up. But ideally, I'd like to find a way to display them maybe in the SOA library over the break. So that would allow you to have access to them during business hours. If you just want to get into yours to take some quick photos or to make sure it's still, holding up and, you don't need to re-glue some things, but they're really good work. They're really, really good work. And a lot of them are really well crafted. I'd like for them to be displayed in the school. And so, and aligned with that, I might also see if I can take some of the example drawings of yours and just print them out in 11x17s and start to tile them as well. So that's something that me and my GA might try to do. So hopefully I'll have some news for you guys one way or the other on Wednesday, either about how to pick up your grid shells models or if they're going to be displayed on display in the school. Okay. Either way, if you're not able to pick them up between now and the winter break, I'll be keeping them safe for you so that if you wanted to pick them up in the spring, you can, right? So I'm not just going to throw things out willy-nilly. I have respect for you guys and your work. And I really, truly mean it when I say you guys did some great work. You guys did some great work by and large. Really good. And I think the grades show it. I think I'm pretty much done grading project 2. So I'm just going through on my end and selecting duplicates and selecting points, just making sure I'm cleaning things up. Just typing in SELDUP, select all.
We're deleting the points again, right?
Yeah, I'm just selecting the points so I can delete them away. Right?
Okay, got it. Thank
the
you.
points are a result of having to select some curves that I've already generated and finding the intersections between curves. And I just don't even want to deal with those, right? They're not worth it. They're not something that would show up in my drawing anyway. So just getting rid of them. Over 10,000 duplicate curves, and I'm just deleting her away right now. Perfect. All right. And I'm just going to go ahead and say SELCRV, right? Select curve, cell curve. 83,000 curves that I generated, right, as intersections. I'm going to go ahead and select those all. I'm going to go back to the properties box, and I'm just going to set them to my edge curves layer so that all my curves that I've generated are on the same layer. I can turn that layer on when I need to see those curves. I can turn them off when I don't need to see them. And my file will feel a lot lighter when they're off. Okay, so I'm going to set those to the edge curves layer. Okay. There we are. They're going to turn off for the time being because my edge curves layer is actually turned off in my layers list here. All right. And again, once I'm up to a certain point, I'm just going to save again. It's always good to get in the habit of, if you're using your dominant hand with the mouse, your non-dominant hand is at the keyboard. And when you're really bored, you can hit Control S, right, with that non-dominant hand, right? You can start to, again, with a lot of CAD programs, you can use the keyboard for certain things and use the mouse for other things. And so, it's really usually a two-handed sort of deal here. Okay, so let's take 5 more minutes at 10:45. For those of you who are ready, I'm going to show you some of the next steps. If you're not ready by then, do not panic. Don't worry. Don't worry. You don't have to watch. You can just keep going because I'll go over these steps again, either at the end of today or the first thing on Wednesday, right, on the last class meeting. Okay, so don't worry. Don't panic. If you're not ready in 5 minutes to move on, but for those who are, at 10:45, I'll kick back on here, and we'll capture viewports at a certain size. We'll do make 2D only for the scene silhouette, just to give you a sneak peek. And if you're working back at home, you want to try this out early, you can. And we'll composite these things in Illustrator, an 11x17 document. That way, everything will be the same size. It'll be consistent 11x11 sort of size for these axons. Yeah, so we'll go from there. All right. So take a few more minutes if you're just wrapping up this sort of line generation with the dupe edges and the intersections. If not, just keep on working on that. Keep working on that. The last steps are sort of pretty easy, and they're really a rehash of things that we've done in the past. when it comes to do a make 2D, a capture viewport, going back into Illustrator and auditing the drawing, sort of clean things up, right? So, and again, we'll have time to do that again, over again on Wednesday. In fact, that's what we'll do. On Wednesday, you'll have a new assignment up on Canvas. And by the end of class, you all should be able to just sort of upload your PDFs, right? Some of you before the end of class, right? In fact, maybe none of us might need the whole class time to finish on Wednesday. We might get out early, so, right. I vote for the early, I don't mind getting out of class early. I don't know about you guys. I'm guessing I'm not the only person. By the way, everybody I show your grid shell models to, their jaws drop. They're like, oh my goodness, these are great. So just need to find the staff in the library and talk to them. Hopefully I can get them up somewhere in the library. Get as many up as I can anyway. And they'll be probably resting safely on tables or something, with hopefully with some printed drawings in the background or something like that. I'd love for the rest of the school to see this stuff. So good stuff, good stuff. Let's see. While I'm waiting, sorry, I should mute. I'm just checking my email. Another meeting, great. Waiting your scheduled Zoom meeting. And that is tomorrow at noon. Can make that. Delete. Golly. I don't know about you guys, but as time goes on, I delete 90% of the emails I receive without even reading them. It's ridiculous. Just how many junk emails I get. Half of them are from UNLV. But they feel like spam. Good grief. I don't delete student emails. I say that. But, so 10:45. We have another minute or so, right? If you're just wrapping up the line generation, you want to see the next steps. About another minute or so. Actually, my system had just turned at 10:45. All right, so I am going to go to the parallel view once more. I'm going to make sure that this is truly a 30-30 axon. That's really important, right? If I accidentally clicked and dragged this and it's not 30-30 anymore, like this, right? I see a lot of this from people. Come on. If you want to call yourselves architects eventually, you got to have scales and triangles and tick marks like burned into your retinas, right? You got to be, that's not a 30-30 axon, right? That clearly looks wrong. So go back in, reset this, right? You want to make sure that that's perfect. No one else will, right? If the architect doesn't care, no one else will. And then bad stuff happens. Right? There we are. That's not the right view. What was it? Maybe it was southeast, northwest, maybe. There we are. That's my view. All right. So this is a true 30-30 axon, right? It's not perspective. It's parallel, right? It's an axonometric, an isometric drawing. Sometimes called a paracurve, parallel edge, para-edge drawing, right? So I'm going to turn on this edge curves layer. All of these lines are going to show up, right? Again, let me just quickly say, these lines aren't showing up, right? By default, your rendered viewport display mode doesn't show curves and lines, right? So I went to tools, pull down, options, right? Yours probably looks like this. Down along the left-hand side, I can go to view, expand that out between display modes and OpenGL. I'm just going to go to display modes, open that caret, and then look at rendered view. right? I want to say show curves in the rendered view, and hit OK once you're done. All these curves now, all this line work that we generated should show up. And so instead of having to wait forever to do a make 2D that's going to look kind of crappy anyway, because for some reason the make 2Ds, when they're this complex, have lots of little goof ups in them, right? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here. I'm just going to make sure that this is framed correctly. I'm going to go to View, pull down, Capture to File, right? I'm just going to capture the viewport, okay, to File. And then in this settings box, I'm just going to do a few quick things to make sure that I have everything set correctly. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure a transparent background is clicked on. And make sure that my parallel view is the thing that's actually being exported out. I'm just going to look at, first of all, you have the size of my viewport. So my size of my viewport happens to be 3,570 pixels by 1887 pixels, right? Okay. Now, if I think about this, I want this to fill up an 11 by 17, and I want it to be 300 DPI. Since, I'm going to be printing all these out for you guys at some point, maybe, right? So I want them to be high res 300 DPI, right? So if I think about 11 inches in the short direction, 17 inches in the long direction, right? So if I think about 11 inches in the short direction, right? Like say height, right? If I think 300 DPI, that's pixels per inch, right? Then I need the short dimension to be at least 3,300 pixels, right? So 11 times 300 is 3,300. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to up my scale, and I've upped my scale to 2. And what that did is that changed my resolution from this down to here. In resolution, it says 7,140 pixels by 3,774 pixels. So as long as this short direction is over 3,300 by just a little bit, I'm good. Okay. So I've upped the scale here, in my case 2, in order to get this short dimension up to 3,700. Now what that means is it's going to take this and it's going to re-render it twice as large. So it's going to mean it's going to have 4 times the amount of information in it. So it might take a minute to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to make sure I select PNG as the output to save as the file type, right? If I save as default a JPEG, it won't preserve that transparent background. JPEGs don't use alpha channels and have transparency to them. PNGs do. Okay, so make sure you save as type PNG. Okay. Otherwise, when I try to tile all these PDFs together as a sort of Axon City, you'll have this white background around yours, and it'll like crop out, the stuff that's behind it. And I'll hate you, right? I just won't be able to include yours, right? So you don't want that. Okay. I can't tell you how many times I've had really good projects, one little mistake, and then they can't be included in these things, right? So, all right. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that's a PNG, and I'll go ahead and hit save. All right. I've already done this, so I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. All right. So again, I made sure this is set to parallel, a specific axon, right? Pick the view, the isometric. I made sure I didn't alter that. I made sure that it's fit to screen. I made sure all my lines turned on, right? I made sure that my lines are showing up in render display mode. Okay. Then once I'm there, I can go to View, pull down, Capture to File. In those settings, that's what I was just talking about here in the settings box. Again, just to quickly rehash. Oh, come on. There we go. Transparent background is clicked on. I set the scale so that the minimum dimension is over 3,300 pixels. That way I can ensure a 300 DPI graphic when I resize this in Illustrator. Make sure parallel's on, hit OK. Make sure that the save as type, that file type is set to PNG. Go ahead and name this, set it where it's saved, and save that out. It might take a few minutes. Right? Whenever you increase something by 2, right? When it comes to an image like this, it increases the height by 2 and the width by 2. So basically, you basically squared, right? You have 4 times the amount of information, 2 times 2. So just keep that in mind, right? It might take a minute or 2 for it to generate this viewport capture, right? Let me try to find mine here. Let's see. Yeah, just pull up the preview of mine. It's right here, right? And this is just a Mac preview because it's a PNG file. You know, it has this sort of, you know, this transparent background. I can zoom in. It's pretty decent resolution. When I start to zoom in too far, you can see, you know, what used to be a Make 2D with a bunch of vector line works is now a bunch of pixelated raster graphics, right? But it's a lot quicker this way than using that Make 2D tool when we have this much geometry, this much complexity, right? I want perfection, and this is the way to get perfection in a realistic timeline, okay? Now, the one thing it didn't do is actually give that outline of the scene silhouette and beef it up like you would want to do, right? That's a very common line weight strategy where you take all the edges with sort of space or air beyond them, you know, behind them, and you beef that up, right? The scene silhouette, in other words. And so I am going to do a Make 2D here just to get that scene silhouette, okay? All right, so that's the next step. Again, I'm in parallel viewport. I want to make sure I have not changed this at all, right? So it's going to line up with all that, the render that I just took. I'm going to say Make 2D. Come on now, Make 2D. Select the objects to draw. I'm just going to click and drag window around this. Select everything. Oh, you know what I can do? I don't actually need all these edge curves at all. I can turn that layer off. So I'll have to deselect and then reselect everything, but that's fine. It'll be a lot quicker once I turn that edge curves layer off. All right, so now I just have the geometry that I want to draw a silhouette around. Go ahead and hit escape here. Okay, Make 2D one more time here. Turn those edge curves off. There's no reason to have all those edge curves on. Go ahead and just do this really quickly. All right. And I'm going to turn off the tangent lines, the hidden lines. Just going to leave the scene silhouette on and the viewport rectangle on. Okay. Just the scene silhouette and the viewport rectangle. It'll still try to give me some of these visible lines, all these sort of edges. But it won't take too long, I don't think. I just don't have to worry about them being perfect anymore, right? And having to go through and fix a lot of stuff. I'll just turn that layer off when it's done, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and do that Make 2D right now. Right. What's nice about the Make 2D is at least it gives you this progress bar so you can sort of see and monitor where you're at. Although sometimes it has the habit of getting up to 98, 99% and staying there for a few minutes, I've noticed, which is pretty annoying. See, now it's slowed down at 97 to 98. That's fascinating. But I don't anticipate this taking too much longer here. It's still progressing, so. All right, let's see here. Really, these last steps are things that we can spend all of Wednesday doing if we need to. Okay. I'm doing the Make 2D. Once that's done, I'll select just the scene silhouette and the viewport rectangle. I'll export those out as an Illustrator file. And I'll bring all this stuff together in Illustrator. I'll have a little bit of cleanup with the scene silhouette. I have no doubt about, for whatever reason, it has a really hard time with the scene silhouettes, which is annoying. Even though I have that cleanup to do, I found that it's easier to actually have all that line work, the start of that line work to just sort of close up and fix. So I'll just go ahead. That's why I'm going through this process. It's a lot easier than just drawing it from scratch. Okay. So there's my Make 2D. You can see it in top view because it flattens out this line drawing onto the XY plane. So that's why I see it in top view so nicely. Just going to move it out of the way here of my model. Just sort of move it in the X direction here. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay. I already clicked. This is taking a minute. All right. Just going to set that to the active layer here. Just make 2D layer as the active layer. That way I can turn these other layers off. Maybe again, the sort of lighten this up for me here a bit. Maybe. Okay, there we go. All right. So now I just have the make 2D layers on. For this make 2D, I mean, one of the things I might do, I'll take these as visible curves. I'll select all the objects on it and just delete it. Right. You can see that there'll be some scene silhouette stuff here to sort of fix and close up in places, right? But it's nice to actually have that started for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and select this, the viewport window, right? The viewport rectangle and the scene silhouette curves. Top view, I'll go export selected. I'll save this as an Illustrator file, not an AMF file. I'm not sure what that is. Illustrator AI, there we are. Call this aggregate silhouette or something like that and hit enter or save. Okay. Bring that as its Illustrator file. Hit save. I'll just replace this one that already exists. Snapshot of current view. I'm just going to leave this as default and hit OK. Okay. Don't necessarily need a scale here. All right. And then inside of Illustrator, oh, actually, this I guess is the example I was working on a minute or two before class. Here, I'll click this aggregate. So here's what I get, right? Here's that Illustrator file I just generated. First things first, I'm going to change my file size or my edit artboard size, my document size, page size. Right now it's set to 8.5 by 11 portrait. I'm going to set this to 17 by 11 landscape. So 11 by 17 landscape, 17 in the long direction, 11 in the height. All right, now I can select this viewport rectangle and the silhouette inside. I can change the height to 11 inches. Yeah, right. So now it'll fill the document. Let's see, this is set to, I'm sort of referencing the center point of this geometry. So the center of my document would be 8.5. So go ahead and move that over. And 5.5 in the Y direction. Now it's all centered nicely. All right. I'm going to make a new layer here. And I'll lock these layers for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and file, pull down, place that rendering I made. There we go. There's that PNG file. It's 8.6 megabytes. It's not too bad. Just going to place it right here. And let's see. In the center, I'm just going to say 5.5 again. And sorry, this should be, I think, 5.5. This should be 8.5. And then the height should be 11, just so it matches the viewport rectangle. Yeah, there we go. All right. Can lock that layer, unlock the scene silhouette layer, turn off the viewport rectangle layer. Now it's just a matter of going in, right? And this is kind of a beefy line weight, right? So I'll change that line weight, but for right now, it just sort of helps me really see where I have line work and what needs to be fixed a little easier, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this kind of thick. I know I just need to add a couple of lines here and there. Adjust a couple of these. I'll hold down the shift key and snap that back to there. Not sure what that is, but I'll go ahead and delete it. Just move that one up. Right, just doing some quick cleanup around the edges here. and keeping my smart snap, my smart guides and geometry snaps, just letting Illustrator show me and tell me where things line up a little better here. It's really unfortunate Rhino can't get their shit together and do a better Make 2D scene silhouette. But in the meantime, I don't apologize to you guys for making you just sort of look at your drawings a little critically here. And just going through them with a fine-tooth comb, taking a little bit of time, making sure that they're just downright perfect, right? Because that's important, darn it. It's our craft. We make drawings. We should be darn good at it, right? Whether the computer is helping us or not. No great drawing happens in just a matter of seconds. All right, so again, I'm just going around, cleaning things up. I call it sort of auditing the drawing, right? Like sort of going through and making sure that everything's on point here, right? Everything's in its right place. Just taking my time. That's what's nice about this when you're doing it in classes. You know, you're not, you know, it's not 11 p.m. You're not tired. Well, you might be tired. I don't beats me, unless I know the better. But you know, it's not an ungodly time of the day or night or morning. All right, just get in the zone and do your work. All right. It's always nice when you can do that. And so I would just go around and do this all the way. Right? A couple of places. You know, I'll just back up here. You know, there's a couple of places where this thing sort of steps out just a little bit, trying to understand where things actually line up. Might be a little bit of redundant line work, right? Where at this line weight and at this scale, you know, we can simplify. You know, we don't, you know, this, I just would question why I put it in there at all, but just sort of trim that out. Again. Yeah, close that up. There we are. Just work my way around. And again, if you're in a good place where you can just sort of sit and make architecture, right? Instead of rushing. It feels like everything's always a rush, right? Sometimes it's nice to just be able to sit back and do something like this. Sense of accomplishment, right? You do this and then you're finished. All right. Believe me when I say you'll be happy when 367 is over. There's definitely a time in the semester where you've had too much Josh. We're rapidly approaching that. For some of you, we may have already hit it. All right. You'll notice that there's a couple of little holes here in the middle, right? Don't want to leave those dudes out. They have to feel important too. You know, that's too small of a hole to really, I don't care about it so much. I'll just close this one up, right? That way, if I go back in and change that line weight down, you know, it'll still look okay. This needs cleaned up. Let's see, I'll move that back there. I don't know what's going on here. Rhino was smoking crack earlier or something. Beats me. I always blame your software tools when you can. All right, here we go. Right, so I have a couple of cleanup places. I keep going around those edges, cleaning things up. That needs cleaned up. Close this thing up, right? By that time, I'm done. By that time, I'm done. I can save this as a PDF. Oh, I probably want to adjust these line weights a little bit. So I'd go back in here, select them all at once. Maybe go to 1.4 something. That's pretty esoteric number. 0.75 or maybe 0.5, you know. I don't mind it actually sort of standing out as a silhouette like this. 0.75 seems to look nice. You can still see it, still noticeable. Go back in here, start cleaning more things up, etc. Right here, you can tell, right, the difference between those vector graphics, right, where it's a bunch of line work that you can still edit, change, adjust the line weights, adjust the coloration, versus, you know, when it's just a rendered sort of raster graphic, and when you zoom in, it's a set of pixels, right, just a bunch of colored squares on a grid, right? So that's the difference between rastered and vector graphics. And anytime we can, we like to keep things as vectorized. But in this case, you know, I can be realistic here. Keep it real. All right. So I'm just going around cleaning things up. And this is where I want everybody to be by the end on Wednesday. All right. We'll get there. Don't worry. Just going back through the Make 2D silhouette and just adding the finishing touches, right? Adding the human touch here. Sometimes it makes all the difference in the universe. That goes there. That goes, oh, Jesus. All right, what a messy thing here. All right, I'll just pick this line, maybe. There we go, pick that point only. Pick that point only, I'm just moving that over. Can't even tell when you zoom out. Right, so you can always zoom in and out. Control plus, control minus, or command plus, command minus, depending on which operating system you're using. You know, it's important not to lose the forest from the trees. You know, here I see trees. Sometimes it's important to zoom out and see the entire forest. Zoom back in, reassess your strategy, right? All right. Again, I'm just taking line work that's already here and just snapping it back to where it should end in a lot of these places. It's bizarre how I can't figure this out sometimes. Come on. Maybe that'll be the next big thing. I'll write a tool that does Rhino Make 2D better than Rhino does. Must be hard because no one's done it. So my guess is I'd have to charge a little bit of money for it. After I make my first million, I'll just retire. Am I saying all this out loud? Gosh, I can't believe it. Anyway, all right. So yeah, anyway, here we go. So again, I could just go through here and just do all of these, right? Just, you know, take your time and just go through and just audit it. Be careful, right? Just go around all the edges and move around in the interior. Just making sure you're covering everything, taking care of it all, right? All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll stop recording as well.